Hello, everyone. Welcome. The team is assembling. Very awesome. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. And super thrilled about the amazing panel of brilliant women that are going to be sharing a little glimpse into their work and practice tonight. So we're going to give it a couple of moments for folks to join us, and then we will get started. My name is Kate Shapiro. I'm the organizing director at the Women's March. The chat is here for you, friends. This is your place to talk and introduce yourself. So if people that have already arrived, if you want to go in to the chat, there's an icon at the bottom of your screen. You click that and you can get into the chat. We would love to hear where folks are calling in from and if they want to share a word to describe how they're doing tonight. So welcome. Yes, come through Florida. So very cool. I will get us started at about 8:04. If people want to say hello, put their name in the chat or where they're calling in from, a word to describe how they're doing tonight. We know it's a wild time, so we appreciate what everyone has done to make it possible to be on the internet for yet another hour. So Zoom time all the time these days. Cool. Awesome. Fantastic. Yes, Medellin, Colombia. Come on now. Very cool. The team is assembling. It's awesome. And I do need to shout out Lory, who is how late is it for you right now? Almost 2 in the morning?
It's 2:03.
2:03 in the morning. Calling in live from Paris. So blessings for that, because wow. Cool. All right, friends. Well, I'm going to kick us off. Again, my name is Kate Shapiro. I'm the organizing director at the Women's March. We are so thrilled to have you all join us tonight virtually and have this incredible panel of feminist artists and makers and cultural workers to talk about art and resistance in the era of COVID-19. We have about an hour together, and the way that this is gonna flow is we're gonna do the welcome as we're doing right now, a little bit of sort of framing, and the vast majority of our conversation tonight will be hearing directly from this fantastic panel. Then there's gonna be some time for question and answer, and then we're gonna close out. We had over 850 of you signed up to be with us tonight. So thank you for doing what you had to do to be with us. We know that these times are anything but normal, and there was a great deal of fear, grief, loss, and possibility flowing in so many of our lives. So I just want to shout out the panel. Obviously, for those that are on the screen, you get to see their beautiful faces, but we have with us tonight 4 amazing women. We've got Favianna Rodriguez, artist, activist, and president of the Center for Cultural Power. We have Paola Mendoza, a director, author, and activist. We have Lory Martinez, a podcast producer, CEO, and founder of Studio Ochenta. And then we have Eisa Davis with the amazing Frame, writer, musician, and performer. So just one other thing about the tech. Is I just want to say a couple of things. One, this will be recorded. So I see there's already some questions in the chat about will this be recorded. This will be recorded, and the recording will be sent out to everybody tomorrow, including also the handles and Instagram information of all of the artists that are on this panel tonight. Just to let people know, we welcome everybody to use the chat however you see fit, as long as it is friendly and respectful, but we cannot track questions unless you put those questions in the little Q&A box. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a little box. You hit that, you can type your question in, and then when we get to the Q&A time, that's where I'm gonna pull the questions from. So I can't get them if they're in the chat. And I can't promise that we're going to get all the questions, but that's going to boost your likelihood of getting your question answered. For those of you that are on the phone, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see the slides or the chat, but the slides will be sent out also, and we're just super glad that you're here. And just the last note around access, that we are providing closed captioning for this webinar tonight. And if you would like to access this feature, you can go to the bottom of your screen, also where the Q&A button is, and you click the button that says closed caption, and then you're going to get it all. So if you want to take advantage of that feature, we welcome you to do so. Okay. Yeah, so I just want to say a couple of words here, and I'm going to show a couple of slides, and then we're going to get into the heart of the conversation. So just wanting to say, sort of on behalf of the Women's March, you know, as we're all pivoting to respond to this moment, we are working hard in a variety of ways to deliver you all information and resources, as well as to spark thinking, connect people to each other, and fortify ourselves for the road ahead. 1 second, I just want to say one thing. I'm seeing some questions in the chat. The way that this feature works on the webinar is that you all can only see the panelists. If you want to see all the panelists at one time, you can go up to the top right of your screen and you can click gallery view. Or if you want to just see the person that is talking, you can click it and it will say speaker view. So I forgot to say that in my sort of tech overview, and I wanted to make sure folks know we can't see you, but we can hear you in the chat. So that's how that works. Everybody else is automatically muted besides panelists. Yeah, and I just want to say that we know as the Women's March that our safety is going to, and our salvation and survival is going to come from each other and our commitment to hold our government accountable together. And inside of this moment of such profound suffering and pain and mounting death toll, we're also seeing glimpses of the best of each other. And that is so overwhelmingly those that are the protagonists and the heroes in this time are not those that have been elected to be leaders, but are actually regular, everyday women, working class people, Black people, people of color, and immigrant communities who are also suffering more needlessly because of prejudice and discrimination and classism that is, of course, baked into the DNA of every institution in this country. So what's art got to do with this? What is the role of art and culture in order to spark, fuel, and advance our movements for liberation? The Women's March, oh, Biko, will you share the screen? Our coworker, Akib, made this jazzy slideshow for everybody to see. That the Women's March has a lot of thoughts about this. Since the beginning of time, not just since the beginning of not 2017, artists help us imagine the unimaginable. We cannot make the world we need if we haven't been able to imagine, dream, see, catch a glimpse of it. Artists and makers and cultural workers are so very much that portal. And that we know also as feminists that artists play a vital role in connecting us to our legacy and all that has come before, telling the stories that those in power would rather squash in silence, and helping us fasten together a future. Since the first Women's March on Washington, artists have helped us tell our collective stories and to convey our truth and power. Our movement wouldn't be where it is today without this. And I want to invite people as I run through a couple of these slides, if you want to use the chat, we would love to hear the name of one of your sort of favorite feminist or women artists and cultural workers, right? That has inspired you, that has taught you, that you seek solace and inspiration from. So we would love to hear who those people are. Yes, Carol Walker, come through. Who those people are. So Biko, oh great. Yeah, so one of the things that the Women's March has been doing has been developing these artist tables and councils that help the Women's March integrate arts and culture into every sort of facet of the Women's March's work. Will you go to the next slide, please, Biko? Those are some names. Will you go to the next slide, Biko? Yeah, and so these are some of the posters that have been developed over the last number of years, working with a group called Amplifier that has helped sort of curate and distribute resistance art They are awesome. You can go to their website. They're fantastic. And so we've been working with them for quite some time. Will you go to the next slide? Yeah, and then we just wanted to lift up some of the other beautiful images from many years of work and organizing, sort of the heartbeat of the resistance against Trump. Next slide. Yeah. And just to say also, so we have this sort of two-dimensional art, and then we also have been able to do all of these. Will you go back to that other one? All of these art builds, right? Figuring out how to have art animate and narrate the vision and the demands that we have as women and as feminists across the country. So you can see a little glimpse of that right there. All right, thank you. Next one. Yeah, and just to say that there was a beautiful, Women's March at a convention, I believe it was in 2018, or I could be wrong, my apologies. So we curated an art gallery at the women's convention that we hosted that just also was the sort of heartbeat of the space. Next one. Yeah, and then we had the incredible feminist collective Las Decis with us in Washington, kicking off 2020, helping us remember that we want to finish what we started, and got to benefit from their brilliance. They taught us the dance, and they're just fantastic. So wanted to lift up their amazing work if folks aren't familiar. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Vico. So just wanted to show that a little bit because it felt kind of silly to not be able to have some other visuals to accompany this conversation. And just the last thing to say is that we are, as we're heading into the 2020 elections, we're also, as the Women's March, working with artists and developing an artist council for this year to help us envision what our country could look like. So often art is named as that which is available to those that can afford it and the elites. But we know that art, culture, and creation is our collective birthright, and that we as humans make meaning through story. Our movements are fueled by these dreams and stories, and we're so lucky to have a brilliant panel with us tonight we're gonna launch into that panel right now, who have been devoting their life to a variety of different disciplines. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce our panel. Obviously, I introduced the panelists earlier, but just to say we have about 35 minutes for this conversation. And if people have questions for the panelists as they're sharing some of their brilliance, again, the Q&A is the place to go with that question, so I can be tracking that. So the first question for any and all of you all to answer is, can any of you or all of you talk a little bit about how feminism plays a role in your work, and the sort of differences in how women artists may be sort of surviving or engaging differently during this time of crisis? So I'm not going to call on you. Y'all can decide whoever wants to go first.
I can kick us off. This is Favianna, and I am joining y'all from Oakland. I am Latina, my first generation American. My parents migrated from Peru to the Bay Area. And, you know, for me, my foundations as a feminist artist really start with my lived experiences and knowing that I needed to express myself and my outrage at the patriarchy and all the ways it affected me. I'm so thankful that I have a gift to be able to express it, because what art is really a lens to critically look at the world and make something in response to what we're seeing. Now, I want to say a note about art and feminist art, and that is that the entire cultural sector, whether it's dance, visual art, Hollywood, theater, publishing, gaming, the entire cultural sector is dominated by white men. I mean, and at like the rates, you know, like 85% of works in museum are by white men, 96% of filmmakers are men. It's just like, it's criminal, really. And what this means is that so much of the art that we interact with, what we see, what we listen to, what we see on our screens is through the male gaze. And so that's, for me, being an artist means taking back a gaze, taking back like a view of the world. And I am so enraged by the state of art. I believe that part of why we are living in climate change, part of why we have this crisis is precisely because of the narratives that men have advanced. That includes how we treat the planet, how we treat each other, how we think about future generations. And so me being a feminist artist really means like reclaiming our like human right to be able to tell stories and shape narratives that will eventually shape policies in our world.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Thank you, Favianna, for that. And I agree in the sense with everything that you said. And as a feminist and as an artist, you know, my first exposure to feminism was my mother. And she didn't know she was a feminist because she didn't have that language, but that is indeed what she was. She immigrated here to the United States with me and my brother. She left her family to come to a country that she had nothing. And then my father ended up leaving my mom one day with absolutely nothing, no family, no language, no money. But what she was able to do, that's my little puppy in the background, if you can hear him crying. What she was able to do was build a path that didn't exist for her, and she did that as a single mother. And she provided financially, emotionally. She made miracles happen every day and continues to do so. But she did that with knowing that herself as a woman, there was no option for her but to do that. And she was my first experience into seeing what a strong woman was capable of doing, and ultimately having to fight the patriarchy every day. As an artist, my work is completely influenced by my mother and that experience. And I have never been more proud to be an artist than at this moment in time. And that is because when we look at the world as the world is falling down around us, and Eisa and I have had conversations about this, what we see is people going to art to survive, going to art to navigate through a very uncertain time. We're watching TV, we're reading books, we're watching movies, we're reading poetry, we're listening to music. We are in need of a compass forward because we are in a space that we've never even imagined, right? And so to me, that is the importance of art. That is the critical nature of artists in the society. And yet, very similar to what women experience in across the board, our work is not valued, our work is degraded, our work is secondary. I read an article last week that said 2/3 of professional artists are now unemployed. Imagine what that means to us as a culture. That is 2/3 of artists that are not going to be creating, producing, imagining, inspiring. What does that do to us? That conversation isn't being had in the mainstream. And I feel it needs to be had because I firmly believe that it is artists that can lead us out of this emotionally. It is artists that can envision the future for us. And I think that where we are in this moment in time in the United States is that we are contracting our hearts. And I've said this for years now, that it is an artist's job, and what art is able to do is expand hearts. And it is an artist's job to re-expand the heart of America. And that is what I have been spending the last 3 years on specifically, and what I will continue to do in the future.
You all said it all, so I'm just wanting to add a couple of things. First of all, oh, there goes Paola, but I was so glad to see those slides because, you know, Paola and Paola was the artistic director of the Women's March in 2017. And so she really was instrumental in making sure that artists were there as at the forefront of that resistance, you know, on that beautiful day. And I was so happy to be able to be part of that with her. So thank you. And really all I want to say in response to this unbelievable way that you both have articulated where we are and the importance of art and the importance of a feminist paradigm in that art is, Favianna, when you said that, you know, all of these different forms of art are run by white men, it was so funny. I thought you were actually going to say the opposite, like it's all women, because we all know that the men are the figureheads and the women are doing all of the work, right? This is how it always is, that women are the ones who organize and take care of each other and maintain life and sustain life. And so what I want to think about, you know, as we're in this time is that I think there is in some way a little opening, right? And there perhaps is an expansion of the heart happening toward those who are caregivers right now, recognizing that this kind of way that we have to work together in order to survive a pandemic is done most effectively when we really turn to the women who have been holding it all together, right? And I just also want to help us think about, there's still a way that even though we are all here as artists, and everyone here who's assembled on Zoom really appreciates the immeasurable value of art, I think there's still something in the back of our minds that says it's just kind of, you know, optional, you know, that it's frivolous. It's something that you just kind of frolic, you know, it's like a way to escape. And again, I think that there's such importance in thinking about the imagining work that we do as artists. And as you said in your presentation, Kate, that what we do as artists is think our way through to another world and allow us to be able to change our minds, because we can actually find the compassion in the course of a narrative or in the course of looking at a painting or a mural, to feel our way into someone else's experience. And we don't get to do that sometimes except through art, and that it is this beautiful nexus of possible justice and equality.
Fantastic. Anything you want to add, Lory, before we move on? Or perhaps she's frozen. I think she's frozen. Okay, I'm gonna hope that she comes back, because I'm not frozen. Okay, I can see y'all moving. Okay. Oh, Lory, are you back now?
Yes.
Oh, I think your internet's a little funky.
I don't know what's happening. I'm going to apologize. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I missed the last part of what you were saying, but thank you. I don't know if she had completed her thought. I don't want to cut anyone off. So,
no, if you want to speak to the question briefly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So I'm coming to you from Paris. I'm originally from New York and daughter of Colombian immigrants. For me, feminism in art and in the podcasting industry where I work is really about uplifting other women's voices. I think that through the art that we make in the podcasting industry now, there's this kind of really amazing movement of women voices in this field, which, as you said before, Favianna, is in any media industry, it's all men. And for a really long time, podcasting really was that. And many will argue that it is still the case. Joe Rogan is one of the big ones that people refer to as being the guy in podcasting, and that's really great. But there's also so many amazing podcasts being done by women in this time, and I think that when we talk about art and feminism, we can really talk about uplifting each other. For me, in my own work, it's all about giving other women the opportunity to tell their stories. And in some of the projects that I've highlighted and put forward under the podcasting company, it's really about that. As artists, we have privileges, the privilege to be able to express sentiments that others cannot put words to. And that is a privilege that we can use to uplift each other. And so that is how I view that. And as a creator, and I think as a woman and as a Latina, that is something that I always want to put forward in all of my work. And I think everyone said so many amazing things, so it's really hard to to follow up, but I definitely agree with everything everyone else said as well.
Awesome, fantastic. No, that was a brilliant frame up and sort of encapsulation of the times that we're living in. So thank you for that, brilliant. All right, Favianna, I'm going to kick it to you now. We know that you talk about this time about in terms of giving more spaciousness for artists to create and about self-care as a form of activism. Can you talk about that? Yeah, and are you seeing that being sort of opposite from how others are experiencing this pandemic?
Yeah, so this is probably, I'm going to get a lot of chuckles from the artists. But just similar to what Paola said, when the pandemic first started, it became very clear to me that we were amidst a massive global cultural shift, and that a lot of the old narratives were about to die, really, and that we would be engaging in a culture war for the narrative of what the future could be, because never would I have imagined that we would be talking about universal basic income, or that we would even be releasing people from prison like we have. I mean, all the narratives are called into question, but especially the narrative of capitalism, which is that this idea that we work really, really hard, and yet where are the systems to take care of us? I mean, I feel like even, you have so many people in the world who are at home, and I don't see us going back. We shouldn't go back. Like, there's actually no going back. It's actually now we have to move forward in some way. And so when I was first feeling that, this was in March, I'm in the Bay Area, so we were we were among the first counties that got told to shelter at home because of the boat that had arrived on our port. And I was thinking to myself, oh wow, I'm gonna actually have time to like work on that TV show that I've been putting off. And I felt that I was really looking forward to some spaciousness and some time. And instead, what I realized, and I anticipated this, but it really, the reality kicked in, is that the work of artists is so critical right now. Like, we really need to get out our ideas, our songs, and also they don't have to be finished. Like, I think that we are also experiencing a very DIY culture. DIY means do it yourself. And so I feel like I've been the most creative in my life, not to mention that I'm not traveling at all. I used to travel once a week. I mean, Paola is on the same boat. We used to travel for art and activism. And now all of this time back has really meant an opportunity to reimagine. And so today my organization released a guide that we've been working on for 2 months since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's a guide that offers artists how to actively reimagine what's in our future, right? And it's around housing, healthcare, gender equity, I mean, climate, everything. All of those issues are now being radically reimagined. I'll paste the link here to all panelists and attendees. But what it also, because our movements are, there's everyone from like the People's Bailout to Color of Change that are putting forward major demands. And we as artists, if we're coming from a place of being informed and understanding what the narrative landscape looks like, we can kick butt. So I've now been really trying to pivot towards that. And I've been feeling a lot of grief, actually. People in my circle have contracted COVID. My dog of 12 years just died, and navigating, even going to the vet in COVID, like COVID just makes everything so hard. And so I've been feeling very tender. And so my self-care strategy has really included being in the garden. I mean, you see, I have like 200 indoor plants. I got a whole little urban garden in the back, because I feel like we need to be connected to really our ancestral human spirit, which means taking care of our families, taking care of our communities. So I've been spending a lot of time in the garden. I am a big advocate of masturbation. If you look at my feed, I talk a lot about the importance of recognizing that when we feel pleasure and we are breaking the old stories, right? Being an artist means you're breaking with the old stories and you're creating a new kind of story and you're embodying that, right? And so I always talk about the critical role of pleasure in opening our imagination, helping us unlearn the messages that we got about our bodies, and also moving forward in a way that is pleasure oriented. And that I believe that because I grew up in Oakland with the Black Panthers, right? And a lot of the messages that we would get would be like, no war, no police brutality, no borders. It was so much about the no, and I was all about that for a few years, for like almost half my life. And then I realized that we also need our yes, especially, we are in a moment where we're naming sexual assault. We are telling our stories. That is what Me Too was. It reveals the power of what happens when people share their stories. So if we can change the story, what is our new story? What is the story that we're going to write about? What is, I know we don't want sexual assault. What do we want? What kinds of relationships? What kind of families? What kind of societies? So if my work is to do that as an artist, then I got to come prepared with the goods, So I spend a lot of time really caring for myself so that I could better provide collective care through my art.
Fantastic. So great. And thank you for putting that link in the chat. We'll also include that in the follow-up. And thank you for that offering of that guide. That is so great. So that's fantastic. Okay. I'm getting back to my agenda because I was Googling around for that link, but you already had it. So next up, Paola, you're an immigrant rights activist who uses film to tell the stories of immigrants and who usually travels, as Favianna was just referencing, to where the impact is most felt, to see and record people's stories. How have you sort of adapted and improvised during this time in order to be able to still show up and contribute your talents? And how are you continuing to engage people's imagination or sense of possibility?
I am all those things, and I'm also a mom. And so the reality is that in this moment in COVID specifically, my time, the majority of time spent homeschooling my son, who's 7 years old. And so that has been a major shift for me, who, since I've been really 14, have been living independently, traveling the world, doing and acting how I wanted, and always connected to various communities and to my community. And now for the first time in my life, I am forced to stay at home. And it has been, these past 2 months have been everything that everyone has experienced: fearful, uncertain, magical, hard as fuck as well, from an emotional standpoint, but also because now my work is relegated to 4 p.m. until however late I can stay up, right? And so that means that I have had to shift my creative brain around how do I show up for my community, specifically immigrants, when normally the work that I was doing before was going directly to the problem, to the front lines, wherever that might be. And so it's forced me to be creative. And so what does that look like now? It hasn't stopped me from being an artist, because I am equal part mother, equal part artist. I can never not be either one of those things. But it has forced me to be creative. And so as an example, I had done a photo shoot last fall with a family that I met on the caravan, and it was a magical, realistic take explaining the caravan story. And it was this huge photo shoot, and there was like these really crazy, beautiful images with this family that I met on the caravan. And they were intended to be about one thing. And I was figuring out the release. They were going to be released around Mother's Day. And then COVID happened. And so I had to flip the idea of what I had created my art to be back in the fall to fit in this moment. And so I created an art installation in Jackson Heights, Queens, which is the epicenter of COVID in New York City, and put up these beautiful images all around various bus stops in Jackson Heights and Corona and Woodside. celebrating moms. And basically they were in Spanish, and they said, immigrant moms, you make miracles happen. And it was a very small art activation, but it was really important for me as a mother and as an immigrant, and it was made specifically for that community. And so again, it's finding ways in which I can create around the communities that are important to me, that I'm most connected to, in truthful, honest, dignified ways that are in and around this moment. And so that photo shoot will probably have various lives, reiterated lives throughout the next 3 to 4 months, because there's so many photographs and they're so beautiful, and they are interpreted. You can interpret them in various ways. But I also have a book coming out on September 1st called Sanctuary. And it's a novel around a dystopian, futuristic United States centered around immigration. And it's very scary because a lot of the things that are in the book are actually have happened and are going to happen. So, my focus is also on that. And I think that that's the scary thing, and the beautiful thing, as Favianna was saying around COVID, is that we have to reimagine everything: ourselves, how we work, our society, our politics, how we protest. I've been very heartened to see how creative people are with protests, even though I personally haven't been able to be there physically.
Fantastic, thank you. There is a question that I just wanted to have you answer right now. Is people are like, we want to see the posters. Are they on your social media, or?
Oh yeah, they are on my social media. I will actually go do that right now, and then do I just put them in the chat? How do I do that?
Or you just repost your social media handle in the chat, if people can find it. But the people demand the posters, so thank you for that. That's really moving. Eisa, you, my friend, are a playwright who believes in the Ghanaian principle of Sankofa, which means to go back and get it. You often use your art to focus on ideas that you are grappling with on your own. Tell us a little bit about living in New York during COVID, and if that has led to any inner grappling that has resulted in any creation on your end, or really anything else you want to talk about in terms of your creative practice.
Grappling. It's interesting. First of all, I don't know, Favianna, I also grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm just vibing off of everything you're saying. And growing up in the Bay Area in a family of very, very powerful activists, I actually felt that somehow I wasn't as important as that activism. And I also felt that expressing my emotions and sharing how I felt was somehow also not as important as being part of the struggle. And so I think the way that I found to a kind of intimacy with myself, my true self, that wasn't trying to be the images and the modeling that I saw around me, was through art, right? And so I guess the things that have been occurring, the sort of transformations that have been taking place during this isolation, have been about really furthering that sense of self-intimacy. And this is actually something that Paola and I were talking about with another artist who was in one of those pictures, Yara Travieso. And there's just this way in which there's a returning right now to these very basic ways of being that don't involve the marketplace and don't involve the kinds of values of socio-economic worth that we have been assaulted with. And so something just that's been very personal during this time is that I have always been a musician. I play the piano and sing, but I don't really claim that as much as being an actor, performer on stage and film and television, or writing for television and the stage. And so I think this time after kind of getting my feet and decompressing and going through all of the, changes and the grief of, losing so many community members, losing actual, a very close friend's father who passed from the virus. And I think in all of that, there's just been this new urge that has restored me, which is to go back to why I started making art in the first place. Before that desire or skill set was going to be, something to make a living. But what is it that I needed as a child? And I think that that's actually a metaphor for how to map our way forward, that if we can keep remembering how we wanted the world to look and feel and how we expressed ourselves when we were children, we didn't want inequality or injustice as kids. We want to feel cared for and safe. And I feel like that's the measuring stick for us right now is if we can create a world that's good for children and the people taking care of them, and for those dreams of those children.
Oh, I just got a little goosebump there at the end. Thank you for that, Eisa. Beautiful. Awesome. I want to kick this next question to Lory, and then we're going to have another chance for folks to round out any other comments that they want to make, knowing that you all do so much and there's such little time on this panel to be able to hear. But Lory, as a podcaster, you speak to an audience that's mostly remote, and particularly speak about your experience as a Colombian American. We know that you're creating space for so many communities through your work. How have Trump's attacks on immigrant communities, particularly in relation to the response to COVID, impacted your work? Or are there any comments that you want to make from your also amazing perspective being in Paris, but of course with roots in New York and I'm sure other places?
Colombia. So a little background. I am from Jackson Heights, Queens. And my parents are Colombian immigrants, and I grew up in the community of Colombian immigrants in that neighborhood. When I left Queens for France, I left with the privileges that my parents had gained when they became American citizens. I was American. And in France, no one asked me if my parents were illegal in the same way that they were asking a lot of Latinx communities in the States. And there wasn't really this conversation about what was happening there. And I was seeing all of this news and the election happened. I was here and I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to give even Europe and the rest of the world a better vision of what was happening to my people, to the other communities. And so I used the privileges that I gained in being an American here to tell that story to the world. So I decided to make a podcast that told a story about a Colombian immigrant family in Jackson Heights. And that story was released in 3 language versions. So the languages that I myself speak. So again, using just my own resources and language experience to do this in English, Spanish, and French. And it was really emotional, and it really gave another side of the Latino experience to Europeans, to other people around the world. The response to the show was very, very good. People really were able to see an America that Trump didn't like, an America that wasn't supposed to be the America that he was going to make America great again, that he was kind of projecting to the rest of the world. That wasn't my America, and I wanted to show how proud I was to be American because of my roots and what my parents taught me. So it kind of had this, it was a kind of patriotism at the same time, and kind of remembering the beauty of what the American dream that my parents had thought of, and how it was being distorted politically. So using that art during COVID, in the beginning of the year, we were thinking about how to make a sequel to this show, and looking and seeing if we could reach out to other communities who are being affected by a lot of the discrimination for immigrants in the States. And not just in the States, we decided that the best thing to do would be to do a sequel that touched on the Asian community. And lo and behold,
Hopefully she'll come back. It's about to.
month later in the show, and in France, the hashtag Je ne suis pas un virus is current. Asians are being attacked all over the world because of what's been happening. And so actually, this is also using the art to show another side, to celebrate a culture that shouldn't be chastised or criticized. And so in that sense, it's really all about, what I've been doing is really about using that platform to kind of give another vision of communities, celebrate their joys and their sorrows, and really kind of change perspectives, and give them a chance to also share their stories with the world, because this Mija is available in English, French, Spanish, and Mandarin, just so that everyone that could possibly be affected in my own, according to my own resources and the limitations that I have, I wish I could do it in other languages as well, but really to be able to reach as many people as possible, so that, you know, daughters of immigrants from all cultures can hear this story. So that's what we've been doing at Ochenta. And the show is called Mija Podcast.
Yes, Mija Podcast. Thank you. There is a question for you specifically, and maybe if you feel moved, you can put this in the chat, but people are like, what are your podcast recommendations in addition to Mija? So if you want to share from your sort of perspective, that would be cool.
Yeah, so I can recommend some foreign language ones, if that's okay. There's some really amazing feminist podcasts coming out of France, actually, and really great thing is that a lot of the podcast companies started here are run by women, which is really amazing. And so I would recommend La Poudre, which is one of the first feminist podcasts here. They have some episodes in English, so that's something that you can look into. It's interviews with inspiring women. Another one that I would recommend for Spanish language actually is out of Mexico. It's called Entre tus piernas, and it's a project by Noda Lab and Caldero. And it's about sexuality and feminism. And one of the first episodes is about the Women's March and that chant that out of Chile. So I definitely recommend that one. And for anyone who is interested in just maybe some unrelated to COVID content that's really positive, I'm really enjoying Articles of Interests from 99% Invisible's Avery Trufelman. So that's a great show that's talking about fashion and completely separate out of what we're dealing with. So it's some counter content.
Fantastic.
For podcasters and podcast lovers.
Thank you so much. If you wouldn't mind putting those in the chat, that would be fantastic, so we can put them in the follow-up. But I actually want to take us to a couple of the questions in the chat to get y'all's perspective on some of that, and then see if there's other sort of comments that you all want to offer in closing. So one is that there are actually a couple of young people, young artists that are on the line tonight, and one is just like, any advice for young artists right now in this time, feeling super disoriented as both an artist and an art student? I'm going to read them, and then y'all can answer whichever ones you want. Yeah, and there's another one that is from a 17-year-old who's saying, I'm just really interested in knowing how you got to the place that you're at. Sort of what was been your road that you've walked down. And then there is another question here, and then I'm going to leave it at 3 for now, that I've just lost. But is around, what are you noticing that you're trying to hold on to post coronavirus? I feel like Favianna, like all of you have spoken to that in different ways. But if what do you want to hold on to, and are you anticipating sort of barriers to that, and what are you doing to prepare yourself? So
I'll start with answering the question by the 17-year-old up-and-coming artist and the other young artists as well.
Yeah.
So first is, I did not go to art school. All of my entire art career has been largely not self-taught, but kind of self-oriented, because I applied to so many art schools, I never got accepted. And similarly, my art is not in major galleries, because the same thing, I mean, I feel like there's just been barriers along the way. So I've had to make my own path. And that means, you know, I've made ice cream pints for companies like Ben and Jerry's. I just did this 100-foot glass mural in a big park. It's my first public art project. I'm working with the San Francisco Pet Shelter, in addition to all the art that I make and I sell on my website. So the first thing I would tell young artists is that it's very important to share your story right now and to make sure that it's all digital now. We are transitioning entirely to a digital way of engaging, and most people are going to look at your art on a little phone. So thinking about what story is behind your art, like talk about your process, talk about what inspired you, talk about why you make what you make. Show us what, you know, like your process, right? Really get into, don't just show us the product, show us your process and tell us the story of yourself, right? Because that's what's compelling about art, is who made it and what did your decisions, how did your decisions affect what you made and why? So I suggest to, you know, think about, how are you representing yourself digitally? Do you have a bio? Have you experimented with setting up an online store? Do you have a practice? Are you making art, you know, 10 hours a week, 2 hours a week? If you need more time, your art will get better with more time. And that's something I want to tell the 17-year-old, because I really wish I really got more serious about my art younger, because you know, every single hour you spend in your art is going to lead you to mastery, right? So now I can make things without even thinking about them. And that's because I have mastery with my hands. But you can get to that mastery. You can get to that mastery much sooner. You can learn different techniques, you know, and I think as an artist, we always should be learning. Like, we can draw, dance, express. You know, now I'm writing television pilots. Like, just start learning, watch some YouTube videos, sign up for an online course, but be disciplined about your craft.
Yeah, and that is all so good. Such good advice. I would just say two things. One is have something to say. We don't need just more self-aggrandizing, just bullshit. I mean, excuse my language, but we don't. We really don't. So have something to say. And also, you know, this is what, you see this little frame that I'm in, right? That is just what I needed to have in order to get my computer set at the right angle in front of my piano and my plant. But you can frame your experience and frame your inventions, and ta-da, what do you have? Art.
Fantastic. Anyone else wants to speak on any of those questions? Or I got more that I can ask.
Could you repeat some of them?
Yeah, it was just a little bit of like, what's been your journey? What advice do you have for younger artists? And then are there things that you're trying to hold on to in terms of sort of your professional or your personal practice that you want to keep alive post-corona?
I will say something. I mean, I think a lot of the conversation around art at the moment, we've been talking about how much we've been creating, but I think there's a lot of self-care to be had in not feeling the pressure to create, which is a conversation I've been having with other fellow artists. I mean, when lockdown in France started,
She's gonna come back. She is.
I couldn't work for anything creative. You need to force to come back. And so that's one of the big things that I would say is, don't feel forced to create if you're not in the right mental space to do it. Let it come to you. I think that's the best advice I can give for someone trying to, an artist during this time. If you feel like you need to do something, like, okay, I really need to create during this time, because, you know, 20 years from now, what will I have made during COVID? That's not, don't think of it like that. Just think of how you feel and whether it's worth it to spend the time for your own mental health to work on something. So take the time to decompress, relax, listen to some non-related podcasts, and yeah, do some nice things for yourself. I did a lot of yoga during this time, and my dad, who was in Jackson Heights, he was surrounded by ambulances every week, meditating in the morning. You know, you're never too old to start doing something good for yourself. So that's something that I'm really happy about.
Love it. Thank you. I see that Paola is answering a question. It's from the Q&A.
Half not. I have a little puppy who's like requiring attention. And because I saw someone that wanted to see the little puppy.
Totally. So great. Sweetie.
Sweet little baby. I would say I say a lot of the times to my students is so often I feel that artists are inhibited and unable to create because we are so afraid to create something bad. And I feel that fear of creating something bad stops artists from actually being artists. So I would say, don't be afraid to make something bad. Go out and make bad work. You will make something that's bad. Like, that's just part of life. And so I think at the end of the day, when I look back at my work, I want to think about the body of work that I created versus one piece of work here, one piece of work there, and that was great versus this was bad. I want to see the entire story of my artistic life be full. And that is flawed, and that is beautiful, and that is complicated, and that is learning. And so I encourage artists young artists, artists, whatever kind of artist it is, to embrace that ability to create something bad as well as creating something wonderful. And the process ultimately is the only thing that we can control. And that is what I want to try and hold on to post-COVID. I mean, something that I have focused on before COVID, but I think COVID really has distilled, at least for me personally, what is truly, truly important and what is not. And the process of creating is ultimately what brings me joy. It is why I am an artist, because it is, as Eisa said, it is in that process that I get to experience and think and grow and imagine and learn, and come out after every piece of art that I've created. I've come out slightly different, and so that is what I feel the best advice. That's the advice that I wish someone would have given me when I was in theater school, because I went to theater school. Excuse me, my dog's on the table.
Thank you. I know that we're very close on time, but I do want to ask this last question, and then I want to ask you all too. There's a couple of questions in the chat too that are like, how can we support feminist artists? Like, we're in, like, we want to do that. So what I want to ask for the panelists in that regard is if there are individual artists or if there are organizations that are led by or, you know, have feminist artists inside of them, to share those links with me, and so that I can make sure to put that in the follow-up email so that we can capture some of that wisdom. But the last sort of question that was repeated a couple of times in different ways was like wanting to hear if any of you all have thoughts around how can we stop treating art as frivolous and insist on the value and respect that we deserve as artists. Sort of going back to this point that you all have all made beautifully around, like, artists are going to lead us out of this and are going to light the way forward in this new world as everything's crumbling down. So if people have thoughts around that, would love to hear any final thoughts, and then we will wrap it up.
Yeah, I have a final thought. I mean, just like people think that being a parent or a caretaker is not work, it's work. It's domestic work, right? Making culture is work. It's art work. It's labor. And I think that we have to value our labor and name that in order to make something good, you go through years and years of training and failure and, you know, second guessing yourself. And that really being an artist is that you walk a path of always knowing that you want to create something that's going to live past you, and that it takes a tremendous amount of energy. So I think reminding folks that art and culture are labor, and they are essential labor, actually, because it is what powers our imaginations.
Thank you. Anyone else on that? Okay.
I think we have trained this society to believe that artists shouldn't get paid. Meaning, how many emails do I get asking me to work for free all the time? And I don't mind donating my time. I don't mind doing that at all. But I'm talking about actually things, people, companies that shouldn't be asking for donations. So I think it's incumbent upon artists to make sure that we don't work for free. And also it's incumbent upon foundations, organizations, companies to not ask artists to work for free. We don't ask computer scientists and computer programmers to go and program I don't know, some software for free. So why am I constantly being asked to create a film for free, which is, as Favianna said, is so much labor, it's so much work. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, we are at 9:01. I feel like we like barely even just like scratched the surface. But just want to say, so moved by y'all's work and insights and contributions. And thank you for a taste. And hopefully there will be more to come. Obviously, we've got a big road ahead of us. And we will be sending out the recording to this call. We'll also be sending out that slide deck. And then we will also do our best to capture some of the brilliance from the chat in terms of resources. And we'll collect other resources from the panelists if they have those to be able to send out in a follow-up email. And we will see you perhaps in the streets, likely online. I feel super moved and grateful to have been able to be a part of this tonight. So thank you once again to our fantastic panelists and all that you brought. So thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Y'all.
Night.
A lot of love in the chat, so that's really sweet. All right, we'll see y'all. Okay.